on the question of what is the character of America. Beyond the immoral and unjust war against the people of Iraq and the threat of terrorism in our nation, there's a war that is being waged to decide the character and the soul of America. Do we choose as a nation to stand for the principles of freedom, justice, and equality that our forefathers and mothers have shed their blood, sweat, and tears for, in our land as well as in foreign land? Do we choose to stand for a Bush-Cheney neoconservative ideology that desired to shape the world with a pseudo-mask of democracy, but in essence represents American imperialism and the establishment of an empire? Do we choose to stand for the evil of being known as a nation that accepts torture and disguise its national security as interrogation, or a nation that is a forerunner of human rights and sees any form of torture as merciless evil against humanity? I ask you, what is our character as a nation? Shall we as a nation stand for this torture? Do we choose to promote the mass of democracy throughout the world and cause our sons and daughters to die on the streets of Baghdad and Fallujah and Ramallah, while at home we slowly attack our own Bill of Rights, attack our own civil liberties, attack our own civil rights? That is the heart of the Constitution. We must decide today, as the true patriots of America, that we will not stand by as the mockery of democracy is spreading throughout the world, while our Constitution is being chipped away before our very eyes. What do you say? What shall America stand for? What shall be the character of America? Shall Abu Ghraib prison and the sadistic, perverted torture of prisoners in Iraq and other foreign lands be our character? No! I say no. What do you say? No! Shall the torture of prisoners at Guantanamo Bay be our character? I say no. What do you say? No! Shall the torture of American citizens, like the New Orleans 13 of the Black Panther Party, by local officials and by COINTELPRO and the FBI, be our character? I say no. What do you say? No! The character of the unjust sentence of Lumumba, of citizens of our Portland, be our character? I say no. What do you say? No! Time is coming that our nation has to choose what will be our legacy throughout the world. What will be the character of America? It seems like I hear the great German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, beware that you do not become the monster that you're trying to kill. This is a war that we cannot lose. This civil war for the very soul and character of our nation. Too many have shed blood. Too many have died on our land and foreign lands. Too many have been beaten and arrested and imprisoned. Too many have died to mark America as a nation of freedom, justice, and equality. We cannot lose this war for justice. If we are to wage a war of ideas for the character and the soul of America, one day we will awaken and our children will hear the voices of the historians. They will read in the history book that there was a people that were willing to take a stand. There was a people that were willing to be noble. There was a people that were willing to be courageous, to say no to the Bush-Cheney administration, to say no to war in Iraq, to say no to torture, to say no to stripping away our civil rights with the Patriot Act and our civil liberties and our Constitution. There were people that say that we shall take the high road. We shall take the road that leads to justice, that leads to human rights, that leads to peace. What do you say?
Oh, yeah!
A noble people. A noble people. America, the true America is a noble people. A noble people that have fought from the revolution, that have fought the Civil War, that have fought on foreign lands, that have fought in the walls of segregation for peace and justice and equality. We say to the Bush-Cheney administration, we will not let you destroy our nation. What do you say?
Qatari has a program on the second Thursday at 6 p.m. You can tune in and listen to him. He's archived his programs online as well. Let's hear from him now. Gudars.
Thank you, Ani. Thanks everybody for coming today. I'm trying to very briefly give you a little perspective of what is going on with what relates to Iran. And there is this discussion about the no war on Iraq has to be specific to Iraq and doesn't really relate to any other theme. And I want to just tell you that we are not sub-team. We are the team. We are part of the war in the Middle East. The fact is that all of these issues that we discuss, from the oppression, from the civil rights in this country, to occupation in Palestine, and occupation in Iraq, and occupation in Afghanistan, and future military intervention in Iran, they are all connected. They're all planned. They are little pieces of the puzzle that builds the whole neoconservative project for the Middle East. And it is really silly to try to think this is something that happened to me yesterday. I was distributing these postcards that says no war on Iran, and a woman came to me and folded this and said, just say no war. And I said, well, if you have problem with Iran on it, this is my card. I have no war on Iran on it. If you don't want it, don't use it. That's the reality of what we are talking about. The Democratic Congress last week scrapped an addition article to the budget supplement that said the administration cannot use the money to attack Iran or to do any other project to send their missiles in Iran. And the Democratic Congress took that out under pressure from AIPAC. You tell me what is the connection of the war in Iraq and Iran. You tell me that there is no connection. The fact of the matter is that the project in the Middle East, the project of democracy building in the Middle East is not complete until they throw down the government in Iran, until they have occupation on the second and the third producer of the oil in the Persian Gulf, until they have control over the Strait of Hormuz, so they can control the flood of the oil from Persian Gulf to anywhere in the industrial and the rest of the world. That is the project of democracy building in the Middle East. There's nothing short of that would satisfy them. We are on the street, we have been on the street even before the war on Iraq started. Millions of people on the streets in all over the capitals of the Europe and the US. We had 50,000 people who marching in this town. We were not able to stop that madness. And now people are asking me. Last week I was on the radio with Dan Haneman on cable, and I said the problem is that this administration doesn't have a rationale for their action. Somebody called after I left, somebody had called and said, well, there is a rationale for them. Yes, there is a rationale for a thief who break into your house. There is a rationale for a rapist who raped your wife. But for the 99% of the world, there is no rationale behind these atrocities. And for us, there is no rationale for going to Iraq and occupying a country and killing 600,000 people and 500,000 more people in 90s. There is no rationale for the people with the mental stability. Obviously, there are old warmongers that they have rationale for occupying other countries, and they have had that rationale all over the years and all over the history of the mankind. But that's not rationale for a human with a little bit of mind and with a little bit of conscience, with a little bit of understanding of why this world is operating the way it is operating. Obviously, there are rationale for them. There are oil under the Middle East all over the place. Wherever you drill, you can find some oil. If it is important for us not to drill in Alaska, how can we stand it occupying and killing millions upon millions of people just to get fuel to fuel our vehicles and drive all over the town? We are not sub-themes. We are the themes. We are the real reason for this war. Our oil is being used for 200 years by the American imperialists. We have to do our own conscience. We have to use our own conscience. We have to do whatever we have in our hands to oppose these wars. 70 million people lives is on stake right now. The women, the democracy movement in Iran is totally stopped for 10 years behind what it was in 2000. It went back. Nobody dares to stand up to atrocities of theocratic regime because we don't want to be perceived as inviting foreign intervention and foreign occupation. Intellectual in this country, we were talking about all these issues. Now we are all silent. We are silent lamb because of the aggression that happens in White House. Under your watch, under the people in this country watching this happening. I invite you to come and do your share this Wednesday, the day after tomorrow at 10:15 in this City Hall. We will pass a resolution against the war and for promoting friendship between Iranians and Americans. Please be there at 10:15 Wednesday morning and voice your opinion, voice your conscience. Thank you.
Is Bob Weaver here? Looking for Bob Weaver. Actions in the war on terror. Formerly a partner at Stoll Rives, Tom is now in private practice in Wilches, Oregon, as a solo practitioner with Practice Limited to civil human rights cases, mostly pro bono work. Tom is here today to talk about ending the assault on civil liberties here at home.
Thank you very much. pleasure to be here. I was having coffee, believe it or not, freezing assets. The result of that was that ultimately there was an indictment brought against Al Haramain Islamic Foundation. And what did the indictment allege? Answer, it alleged nothing to do with terrorism. Nothing to do with terrorism. It alleged that they might not have reported they paid their taxes, and one fellow took a bunch of traveler's checks out of the country. Well, that wasn't exactly shocking, so we thought, well, let's go to trial on this. Let's put the government to its case. Let's ask them. Prosecute. You got to indict, prosecute. The government folded. They folded their tents and went home. They refused to prosecute. And when they refused to prosecute, they dismissed the indictment. Nonetheless, the assets are still frozen. There's still a cloud over it. Islamic outreach, Islamic dialogue has been muffled in Oregon, I think intentionally. There is a case pending, however, because of that. Because in the aftermath of that freezing of assets, the Department of the Treasury provided a bunch of documents to the Islamic Foundation in order to justify the freezing of the assets. And you know, the federal government, one of the things they did is they, handed over the wrong document. And that turned out to be a top secret document that basically establishes that the United States, the National Security Agency, had been wiretapping communications between Al Haramain officials and their private counsel in Washington, D.C. Now, so when we found that out, and we found out that this was without a warrant, we filed a lawsuit here in Portland, Oregon. That lawsuit has since been consolidated with a bunch of other NSA cases down in front of Judge Walker in San Francisco, and the case is pending. But here you have another erosion of your civil rights. The loss of your right to engage counsel and to share your discussions with counsel without government eavesdropping. Worse than with eavesdropping, they use that information. They use that information to the detriment of the individuals and the corporate entity, notwithstanding the fact they had no warrant for it. No question about it. That case is pending. Now I want to talk about another individual with Al Haramain Islamic Foundation, a fellow by the name of Laid Saidi. Happens to be an Algerian. He was the local manager of Al Haramain in Tanzania. I visited with him in January of 2007, this year, 3 months ago. He told a story. It's available on the web. It's been reprinted in the New York Times. But because he was involved with Al Haramain, he got his phone tapped, and all of a sudden, in July of 2003, he was expelled from Tanzania, taken to Malawi, and by 6 CIA, we assume CIA officers, bundled off to Afghanistan, where he was tortured for 16 months. They kept asking, what do you know about, what do you know about? Finally, because of a mistaken translation of intercepted communications, they realized, the CIA realized, that they had made a mistake. They thought the word tire, as it was being used by him, meant airplanes, when in fact it meant tires. A stupid mistake. But nonetheless, an individual that was carted off to be tortured in Afghanistan as a result of that. Now, our problem is, those are the 3 instances. Our problem are not just civil and human rights. It involves the entire aspect of torture, the abrogation of the Geneva Conventions. And the problem isn't just the Republicans, and it isn't just George Bush. The problem is in Congress. Congress has utterly failed this country and is continuing to fail us. Although I am an officer of the court, let me also say our judiciary has largely failed us. When judges see allegations, for example, of torture, kidnapping, taking to other countries, they have an option. The government comes in and says, for God's sake, don't let the plaintiff say anything about this because it's a state secret. Okay? We've seen Khalid al-Masri, another case of unjustified torture, a gentleman out of Germany, dismissed because of state secrets. Fortunately, some of the judiciary are beginning to realize they can put in this situation. One was Judge Gargin here in Portland, a district judge who refused to dismiss the Al Haramain case on state secrets grounds. What do we do? Well, every morning when I get up, I think, what should we do about this situation? This is a situation as I witnessed. I got a few gray hairs. I think what we do is first we get angry, or I should get angry. I'm angry. I piss off. I should get mad. That's not enough, though. Get radical. We are facing radical problems. We need radical responses. More important than that, we have to resist. We have to stand up. We can't sit back and let somebody else carry the water. And more importantly, finally, the most important of all is not just wait for something to happen to resist, push back. Get active. Find your own course. Do what you're comfortable with. Find your expertise, how you can work. Do what you can, but push back. We got to protect our civil rights. I'm really pessimistic about this. I think human rights are on the decline internationally because of this administration and this Congress and this judiciary. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And now we're going to skip ahead just a moment and hear from Teresa Mitchell.
Let's see. They're commies. They have a nuclear weapon, and they're totalitarian. You think of some more, maybe you can remind me. But before I get around to that, let's talk about totalitarianism in the United States. And we've gotten so used to it, I think we don't see it much anymore. Yesterday we had a rally, big rally. How y'all managed to make it here with your legs all sore, I don't know. But we have a parade permit that you should know about. Each of you has this parade permit. It's good for gatherings anywhere. It came at a tremendous price. It's called the First Amendment to the Constitution. And there are 5 little phrases in the part of the First Amendment that it has to do with free speech. And they go like this. The right of the people peaceably to assemble, to petition their government for redress of grievances shall not be infringed. This is very careful language. And it was the very First Amendment, because it is on that amendment that all the others depend. So I'll go over those phrases one more time. The right of the people. Now, the framers of the Constitution like to say establishment. If they meant to say we are establishing a right, they would have said it. They meant this right is extant. This is a human right. The right of the people. Peaceably to assemble. Anyone have a rifle? Anti-tank weapon? No one did yesterday either. And that's a peaceful assembly. To petition their government. Now, this is why we have large gatherings. This is why we shout a lot. This is why we bring drums and signs, because we're trying to make enough noise and enough numbers to get attention to the fact that something is grievously wrong. To petition their government for redress of grievances shall not be infringed. Now, notice that word did not say shall not be denied. We're not denied free speech, not quite. But oh yes, we are infringed upon. Our free speech is infringed upon when we have people standing around in armor as if we were going to throw spears at them. When we have, I remember one time I gave a speech about the FBI and a man showed up, was at that building over there, showed up with a machine gun. That's intimidation. That's infringement. This is a legal term. When you hear that your First Amendment right, your civil right, your human right is being infringed, that's not a fringe legal statement. That's the law of the land. And so we have this permanent parade permit, and we should use it, because the more we use it, the more we have it. The less we use it, the more the forces of totalitarianism bear it down upon us. Now, we're supposed to hate the North Koreans because they're totalitarian. And this comes, the reason these categories that we're supposed to hate the North Koreans about are bunk, because it largely has to do with lack of context. Let's see, which nation has 2.2 million people in the prison system? Which nation has 1 out of every 37 either in prison, on probation, or on parole? Why, that would be the United States. I call that a police state. As a matter of fact, every one of you has to fear the police. And this has come upon us gradually, hasn't it? The frog has been boiled slowly. Do you remember being so afraid of the police 20 years ago? So, we're supposed to hate them for being totalitarian. And in fact, the North Koreans do have a problem with that. For example, a large section of their population is considered just not good enough to participate in party politics. They can be left alone to starve. They can get less than first-class treatment when massive floods occur, which have occurred in North Korea, wiping out their 18% arable land and their crop base. And what are we like? Did we have a Katrina here? So I'm talking about hypocrisy. You hear these things about North Korea. Now we hear that they have a nuclear weapon. They do not have a rocket large enough to launch a nuclear weapon anywhere, despite what you may have heard. They do have nuclear weapons. We have at least 10,000. We bring some of our nuclear weapons to the Korean Peninsula on aircraft carriers, and we keep them there permanently. We've had them there for 57 years. When we talk about a nuclear threat, we should be talking about ourselves, because the United States has conducted nuclear war exercises, especially for the last decade or so, right on the so-called demilitarized zone, which ought to be called the up-militarized zone. So that's the point I want to make about North Korea. Don't fall for the demonization. It's all bogus. It's all hypocrisy. And, if it weren't for hypocrisy, you just wouldn't have a neocon branch of the Republican Party. Now, back to Iran. The reason I'm concerned about military action against North Korea is secondary to this apparent attempt to ignite a world war, and I say that after looking at the situation as carefully as I possibly can. Building on what Gadar said, the Project for a New American Century has mentioned Iran as something that has to go in order to reshape the Middle East. And it's about time for me to run off and go back to my job, but I just want to make these points. Did you know that the Boxer, the Baton, the Iwo Jima, the Boxer, the Baton, the Iwo Jima, and another ship, all aircraft carriers, are in the Gulf, and that's on top of the super nuclear aircraft carriers, the Stennis and the Eisenhower, and the Ronald Reagan is headed that way. There are groups organized in Baluchistan to attack Iran right now, and Iran is surrounded from the north, the east, the south, and the west by American weaponry, and the buildup is continuing, aircraft are arriving, the war is on, people, and when it is, since our Democratic Congress has so far not shown the guts to either acknowledge it or to stop it, when the war is on, then they will be looking with their fangs drooling towards North Korea. A sad thing, and I'm sorry to leave you with a downer, but that's where it's at. Thanks.
Based in Portland, Mr. Jama is here to say no to military action in Somalia. Casey Jama.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for all of you giving up your afternoon to join with us to demand justice and liberty for all. 5 years ago, we stood here just before the war of Iraq about to start. We already knew what is going to happen if this war proceeds. Since then, many of the things that we were fearful of already took place. If this war has achieved its goal, or supposed to achieve its goal, it is already achieved, which is death and destruction. Just a month ago, I went back to Africa to visit, and as many of you might know here today, the global war on terror reached many, many other countries beyond the borders of Middle East. Last year, people of Somalia organized, get together after 16 years of US-sponsored death and destruction created by warlords that's been funded by the CIA and the US government. The Somalis, women and children and men gathered together in their neighborhoods mobilized and kicked out all the warlords out of Mogadishu. They immediately restored peace and stability after 16 years. Suddenly, within days, people were able to walk freely in the streets of Mogadishu. Women and children came out from their hiding to enjoy peace. Immediately after a few months, the CIA, the US government, contemplated its move against the people of Somalia. They mobilized the Ethiopian troops, funded, provided logistics, provided air support, provided intelligence, and within a matter of weeks, what people of Somalia, people in Mogadishu, women and children fought for so long, disappeared. The Ethiopian troops, with the help of the US, invaded Somalia. Today, Mogadishu, again, it's another Baghdad, where insurgents launch attacks against Ethiopian troops, and in response, the Ethiopian troops launch artillery attacks on heavily populated city of 1.5 million people. People who are dying is not the Ethiopian troops, it is not the Somali troops, it is the women and children in Somalia who are being killed by the weapons that we produce here in this country. So, today, as we stand for commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Iraq War, we said already millions have died, millions more are displaced, and millions of more are suffering the impact of global war and terror launched by this administration. I'm not telling you something that you already know. You already know this. But what I would like to tell you today, we as a country, people of Iraq and Somalia and Afghanistan can no longer wait one more day. We need to demand that the troops be brought home. We need to demand accountability in our own government. Accountability. Bringing troops home is not enough. After that, we need to demand accountability. We need to demand the truth of this war, global war on terror. After that, we need to envision, because you already know the impact of this war. You know Martin Luther King, when he was marching on the streets, despite the repression of the Southern police, the repression of the police and the government, he did not come and say, "Let me list you and give you a list of my problems." He already knew that. But what he said was, "I have a dream." And we have to dream for justice. We have to dream for peace. We have to dream for accountability and demand accountability. So I invite you that all of us, we have to keep Martin Luther King's dream. liberty, and justice for all. Not for few, not for the wealth, not for the rich, but all of us. All human being lives are sacred. So please keep the fight for peace, keep the fight for justice, and we need to continue to envision a global where there is no more war. No more war. No more war. Let us give no more war. Let us give peace and justice a chance. Thank you.